Let's talk about a number that could completely change how you think about your career, especially if you're a tech professional in your 30s, sitting on a pile of RSUs, wondering if you're on track. Most people obsess over when they can fully retire. They're running calculations on their FIRE numbers, stressing about whether they have enough to walk away completely. But what if I told you there's a different milestone, one that's way more achievable, but could buy you back freedom many years earlier? It's called Coast-FI. And here's why it matters. Once you hit that number, compound interest does the heavy lifting for your retirement, and you can stop saving. Pivot to work that actually lights you up, or just breathe easier knowing your future self is taken care of. Hi, I'm Jonathan Nagy, founder of Alpine Road Financial, and I've spent years in tech, working at Apple, Square, and then Adidas. I've navigated multiple IPO exits, and I've watched brilliant people get trapped by golden handcuffs because they didn't understand this concept. Today, I'm going to walk you through a real scenario showing you exactly how to calculate your Coast-FI number, what it means for your RSU strategy, and why hitting it before 40 could be the most important financial milestone of your life. So first, what's Coast-FI and what does it actually mean? Let's imagine in this scenario, you're Sarah and Mike, both 35, tech professionals earning $180,000 in base salary, plus another $80,000 in annual RSUs. Combined, you're bringing in $260,000 per year. You started early and you got $420,000 already saved across your 401k and brokerage accounts. Hey, you're doing well. The grind of your job is real. Traditional financial independence, what most people call FIRE, means saving enough that you never have to work again. If you want to spend $100,000 per year retirement using the 4% safe withdrawal rate, you need roughly $2.5 million invested. That's a big number. It requires aggressive savings for years, often decades. Well, Coast-FI is fundamentally different. It asks the question, what if you saved aggressively now? Hit a certain number, and then let compound growth carry you to the traditional retirement age without adding another dollar. Here's the beautiful part. You're still engaged. You still work. You still earn income, but that income is just for today, for paying for living your life right now. Your future is already handled. The pressure's off. Traditional FI says, keep saving until you can quit. Coast-FI says, hey, you're done saving. The math will handle the rest. One is sprinting, the other is letting the engine run. So now let's run some math. We got Sarah and Mike's real numbers. So how do you actually calculate this Coast-FI number? The formula is simpler than you think. Coast-FI number equals your FI number divided by 1 plus the growth rate you expect by a certain amount of years until retirement. Let's walk through Sarah and Mike's situation step by step. First, what's their full FI number? They estimate they need $100,000 per year to maintain that lifestyle in retirement. Using that 4% safe withdrawal rate, that's $100,000 divided by 4% equals $2.5 million. That's what they need at age 65 to retire completely and pull on their savings for 30 years. But they're only 35 now. They've got 30 years until age 65. Here's where the magic of compound growth comes in. If we assume a 7% average return without inflation, which is conservative based on long-term stock market performance, we can now discount that $2.5 million back to today. So we take $2.5 million divided by 1.07 raised at 30 years. That's their Coast-FI number. Sarah and Mike have $328,000 invested by the age of 35, and they never add another dollar. That money grows at 7% per year, will become $2.5 million by the age of 65. Here's the thing. They have already saved $420,000. They've already blown past their Coast-FI number. They Coast-FI'd, and then they didn't even realize it. So what this actually means for real life, this is when it gets interesting and where most tech professionals completely missed the opportunity. So in this case, we have Sarah and Mike. They're co-FI. What does that unlock? First is career freedom. Mike's been eyeing a product role at a smaller Series B startup. It pays about $140,000, which is way less than his current comp. Before understanding co-FI, that felt impossible. But now, his retirement is handled. If he takes the role for fulfillment and Sarah keeps her current job, they can still cover their lifestyle. The math just works. Second is geographic freedom. They've been talking about moving to Bend, Oregon, where I'm based at, to be closer to the trails, the mountains, and a slower pace of life. Lower cost of living, but potentially lower salaries. co-FI means they can make the move without jeopardizing their future. Third are things like sabbatical options. Want to take 6 months off between jobs? Maybe Sarah wants to hike the Pacific Crest Trail, or Mike wants to build that side project he's been thinking about. When you're co-FI, you can afford to pause without the retirement clock ticking backwards. Here's what most people don't realize. The psychological shift is massive. You're no longer in accumulation panic mode. You're not checking your 401k balance obsessively. You're not one more year in yourself into burnout. The future is secured. Now you get to optimize for present joy. And that's incredibly rare in tech culture. So now let's talk about the RSU decision that changes everything. In this example, Sarah and Mike say have been holding onto their vested RSUs. They got about $200,000 in company stock that's appreciated significantly, which means it's gone up from its vest date. The standard advice is sell and diversify. But what if the stock goes up? What if they miss out on the next run? Here's what co-FI clarity provides you. You can make this decision without fear. If you sell those RSUs and diversify, they're still co-FI. Their retirement is still handled. If they want to keep some of that equity exposure for that upside, guess what? They're also still co-FI. The decision then becomes about risk tolerance and lifestyle preference, not about retirement security. So you can see the co-FI lens changes the diversification question from should I sell to how much company stock exposure do I want? If you're co-FI, you can hold some for upside without endangering your future. If you're not co-FI yet, aggressive diversification makes more sense because you need that capital growing steadily towards your number. So what to do once you hit your number? This is where theory meets real life. You calculate your co-FI number. Maybe you hit it, maybe you're close, maybe you got it a few years ago. Now what? First, you got to validate the assumptions. The 7% growth rate, well, that's a long-term average. But markets don't move in straight lines. Run scenarios at 6% and 8% to see how sensitive your plan is. That's what happens if you want to retire at 62 instead of 65. Second is think about your actual retirement spending. The $100,000 we use for Sarah and Mike, it's a placeholder. Maybe they want to travel more in their 60s and spend $120,000 a year. Or maybe they'll downsize and only need $80,000 a year. Your co-FI number changes dramatically based on this input. Third, this is where I'd say get specific about your why. Money is just a tool. What are you trying to build here? Sarah wants more time for photography. Mike wants to volunteer with kids learning to code. Those are generic retirement dreams. They're specific visions that can start now once you're co-FI. You don't have to wait until you're 65 to start living that life. Fourth, adjust your savings strategy. If you're a co-FI, you don't need to max out every retirement account anymore. In fact, you don't need to save. Maybe you redirect some of that cash flow to experiences today. That trip to Japan that you've been delaying. That home renovation that would actually improve your daily life. Maybe you build a cash cushion for career flexibility. Direction beat perfection here, but you got options. Finally, revisit this annually. Your co-FI number is not static. If you get a big RSU windfall, you might suddenly be even more co-FI than you thought. If you decide you want to retire at 60 instead of 65, you'll need to recalculate. Life changes, your plan should too. So now let's tie it all back, the bigger picture, what this buys you. Let me tell you what I've seen in 20 years working in and around tech and very successful people. The people who figured out Coastify in their 30s have fundamentally different 40s than everybody else. They're the ones who take the acquisition offer to join a tiny startup working on something they actually believe in. They're the ones who negotiate for 4-day work weeks instead of more RSUs. They're the ones like me who relocate to the mountains or the coast and work remotely doing contracting work. That funds their adventures. They're not retiring in traditional sense. They're just redefining work on their terms because they've eliminated financial fear from the equation. Here's the one thing about Coastify that's easily missed. It's not the destination or the number. Rather, it's the freedom and permission to start designing the life now instead of deferring everything to some future retirement day that may never feel like the right time. I've worked at Apple during the iPhone boom. I've helped build Operations Square during hypergrowth. I've navigated 4 IPOs as a family. I've seen a lot of smart people make a lot of money, and the ones who are the happiest aren't the ones with the biggest portfolio. They're the ones who figured out they're enough early and then optimized for time, autonomy, and purpose. And that's what Coastify gives you. It's not a magic number that just solves all your problems, but it's a milestone that buys back your time for what really matters. If this resonates and you want help calculating your actual Coastify number, not a hypothetical, but your real number based off your situation, your equity comp, your goals, your life, let's talk. I help tech professionals turn complicated equity compensation into clear values-aligned plans. You work too hard to leave your future up to chance. Let's make sure your RSUs are funding freedom, not confusion. Head to the link in my description and let's map that out together.